Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Eat Local New York podcast. This week, I'm talking with Isaac from Middle Ages Brewing Company. I'm really excited to sit down with him because I've never connected with Isaac or Middle Ages until this year, and it's just been such a pleasure to work with him. I've bought some beer from them out at the bar and had them out for a tasting event, and just sat down and did a podcast, one of the longest podcast I've done this year, and just had such a great time talking with him here on the podcast. And honestly, there's a lot more questions I really wanted to ask him that I'll have to have him in for another episode soon. But anyways, thank you so much for watching this on our YouTube channel. I just want to give a quick shout out to our new sponsor, Pascal's Liquors, who they are graciously sponsoring all of our new cocktail content, our videos on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram that we're putting out. And so thank you so much to them for sponsoring our videos over there and giving us some awesome spirits to use in those recipes. If you are watching this and you're in Syracuse, Central New York, go check them out in Fayetteville. Check them out in Liverpool. Pascal's Wines and Liquors out in Fayetteville. Pascal's Liquors in Liverpool. You can also visit them on their website, pascalsliquor.com. And if you're watching any of these from out of state, you can purchase right from them, support a local company in our community, and they ship to 13 different states across the country. So make sure you check them out. Also to our sponsors at Barfly Mixology Gear. They've hooked us up with some awesome stuff to use to make our drinks with, and just wonderful, wonderful products. I use them at the bar every single day and can't say enough about them. So make sure you check out those two companies. I'll put links in the show notes, and let's get into the video right now. It's my conversation with Isaac from Middle Ages Brewing Company. It is wild to get out into Rochester and just trying to become familiar with the area, but then also it's interesting to go to a place that's not home and talk to people that do the same thing that I'm familiar with back home about stuff, and just kind of getting.
I assume it's Eat Local that's bringing you out there, right?
Yeah.
So.
I was. We're Eat Local New York, but 95% of what I do is Syracuse. And
that's where you're from. So.
I just feel it's like prestige worldwide, and then all you do is events in your little town. So I had this like I don't know what to call it, premonition, feeling, knowing. I was like, I have to go to Rochester. I have to start getting to Rochester once a week, starting immediately. So this is my third week going out there, and it's been fun. It's nice to get out there and see different food.
It is. It's a cool place. I like Rochester a lot.
Yeah.
My wife is from Clyde, but her parents are both from Rochester.
Okay.
So she has a lot of family in that area. So we're out there fairly often.
That's cool. So are you from Syracuse?
Yeah, born and raised. I grew up in DeWitt. Went to JD. My dad was raised here. My mom's from Oneida, so local.
Yeah.
I've always really liked it here.
Yeah.
Never had an urge to
leave.
No, I never really have. Yeah. Went to college in Ithaca.
Yeah.
I like upstate New York. I like Syracuse. It's it's the right speed for me. It's I like visiting. Busier cities or the country or whatever. But this is like the right pace for me. So
yeah, I like Syracuse too. I really do. There's moments. Last night was one of them where we went to dinner at Kasai. We parked in that parking lot right next to it, that small one, and on the way out, as we're walking to the parking lot, a DoorDash driver pulls up and parks blocking that parking lot. Yeah, and I'm like, what the fuck, And I just had one of those moments of I fucking hate it here. Why the hell do we live here? But
are you from here?
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Kentucky, and when I was 13, we moved here.
Okay.
And I graduated high school here. I've lived in South Central Ohio, Southern Ohio, Cincinnati area, and a little bit north. I've lived in Central Texas for a couple years. It was like 45 minutes from Austin.
All right.
And I've lived in San Diego for a month, and then came back. Yeah. So I like it. I do. Yeah. Syracuse is Syracuse.
Right. I tell people that it's a unique town.
Yeah.
It's, you can't expect what you expect other places. It's just different.
Yeah. It is. It's it's just if you can figure out Syracuse, you can get shit done. You know, you can do stuff.
Yeah.
You can make money, be successful, whatever. You know, but if you can't figure out Syracuse, you're fucked. Because
for sure, you know, like what works other places does not always work here.
Yeah.
You know, like I know Syracuse. I know somebody who used to work for the Lay's.
Okay.
And Syracuse was a test market at a certain point for Lay's.
Really?
Yeah, this might go back to like early 2000s. Okay. And the way he explained it to me was like, you know, they test products here because they figure if they can get it to sell in Syracuse, then it'll probably work most places. And I'm like, that makes sense. Like, you know, we're a fickle bunch here. That's like, you know, especially with new things, it's, you know, it's kind of like we're, you know, a couple years behind in adapting trends sometimes. So if it works here, it'll probably, and it's just, you know, it's the right sized market. You don't have to like, you know, it's not a gigantic investment to try something out here.
Right.
But so there was a period of time where you could get, you know, different Lay's products that were not available anywhere else.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is pretty funny. I wonder what those products were, because all I can picture is like you're like a salt potato chip.
Well, so I know one of them was Ball's soda.
Okay.
Which I actually think ended up becoming like a, you know, I don't know if it still exists.
Yeah.
But it was a soda that had like, you know, tapioca balls in it before.
Oh, really?
Yeah, before like bubble tea was like big.
Huh. That's wild.
It was a carbonated like clear soda, and again, I do think it ended up going like national, but we were a test market for it.
I've heard that of like different cities. When I lived in Ohio, they said Dayton, Ohio, was also like was there, you know, a test market for every fast food chain, and I think actually Morgan, what's his face, whatever the hell the guy's name is, who did the Super Size Me. When he
I know
did,
you're talking about.
Yeah, when he did a second version of that, and he made the fried chicken restaurant, they did that in Columbus, I think, which Columbus and Dayton are like very close to each other. So I've heard that at different markets in the past, but everyone has always said it's a test market for every company, about every city. And I've heard it about multiple cities, and it makes a hell of a lot more sense to say this company, it was their test market. Yeah. Not everyone's test market. It was that company's test market. So it makes more sense to say it was Lay's test market. That's interesting. Yeah. It's I love Syracuse. It's when I lived in Texas, the one thing I always said is in Texas, and like in Syracuse, it was nothing to call up a friend. Like you just went and hung out at each other's houses a lot here, I felt like. And in Texas, it wasn't like Killeen where I lived. It wasn't like that. You went out and did stuff. You didn't go hang out at your friend's house. And so that was one big thing that I felt like was really different about Texas and Syracuse. But I interviewed this guy for the podcast back right when the pandemic started. He's a New York City real estate broker for restaurants, and primarily restaurants. And so he was asking me what Syracuse is like. And I described it as Syracuse is about 5 years behind Buffalo in terms of trends and what works. And Buffalo is about 5 years behind New York City, or maybe even more. So that kind of gives you an idea of what Syracuse is like.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's also kind of weird because some trends, I don't know, seem to like skip New York City. Like New York City was way behind in craft beer for the longest time. Yeah, they were. Like compared to the craft beer, Portland, compared to, San Francisco, compared to like where craft beer blew up, Denver. And honestly, part of that might have to do with real estate costs.
Yeah.
You need a lot of space to build a brewery.
Yeah.
And just the distributors have always had really big control in New York City, going back to the 3-tier system, where, they're selling the main domestics, Budweiser, Miller, Coors, but even now there aren't that many like brew pubs in Manhattan.
Right.
There's more breweries when you get out to the other boroughs.
Yeah.
But those are a lot of them are relatively new in the whole craft beer thing, 2010 or later.
Yeah.
When you think Other Half or Single Cut or the early one was Brooklyn.
Yeah, right.
But even then, most Brooklyn never really had a large brewery down there. Almost all their beers always been contract brewed.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
wow. You're probably familiar with Stay Fresh Designs and Tommy Lincoln. Mm-hmm. So Gabe, who works for them, is a project manager. She worked at Brooklyn Brewery for years.
Okay.
Yeah. That's wild that they did so much contract brewing.
Yeah, no, it's the vast majority of their product is contract brewed, and they don't even have the brewery. They don't have the brewery in Brooklyn anymore.
Really?
The production facility is closed. Yeah.
Wow.
Most of their beer is brewed in Utica at FX Mats.
Stop it. Are you serious? Yeah. No, come on. That's fucking crazy.
Yeah, it's one of their number one products. Yeah. Somebody who worked for me worked there before, and he's like, "Yeah, we were brewing Brooklyn Lager a few times a week."
That is insane. So their FX Mat, they do that's Saranac, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so they do all the Utica Club and all that kind of shit.
Yeah.
And then your other big one is Genesee out in Buffalo.
Yeah, Rochester.
Right. Rochester, that's right. And they're pretty big, correct?
They're the biggest one in New York State besides the Baldwinsville Budweiser plant.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah. It's kind of like this is reminding me of a conversation I just had with Nick Pascal talking about what brands Buffalo Trace owns. Buffalo Trace owns every brand that you can imagine in bourbon. They've got the Buffalo Trace everybody knows, especially recently, but this Sazerac Rye that I have over there, that's them. Then Pappy Van Winkle, that's them. And they've got everything he was saying from the shittiest to the best.
Right.
And that's wild. That's crazy. I can't believe that fucking FX.
Yeah, I know. Again, Brooklyn is their own brand.
Yeah.
And they did have their own, Garrett Oliver is their own brewmaster. He's one of the most influential brewers in the country. And they did operate their own brewery for a decent sized brewery for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I would imagine they still have at least a small system for test batches and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure. I just know that the main production facility closed in Brooklyn. But contract brewing is, once you get to a certain scale, it's more common than most consumers realize. Yeah.
We were in Hawaii for our honeymoon, right before the February of the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And we took a tour of what's the big one on the Big Island? They do Big Wave and shit.
It's either Kona or Maui. I always confuse the two. Kona.
Yeah.
So Kona's the one I think is owned by InBev?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Now
yeah.
Yeah. And so when we were taking the tour of the brewery, I was talking about, he was saying even some of the beers that you would get on the island in Hawaii don't come from that brewery. They come from Colorado and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I was asking the questions of, well, how do you quality control, and what about the water difference? And he was saying that the mineral packs and all that, when you're brewing on that scale, everything is so perfectly fine tuned that there is zero difference.
It really is, yeah.
But if I gave you a recipe for a Kolsch and I gave Buried Acorn a recipe for a Kolsch, and you followed it both identically, they would still probably be different beers.
They'd be a little different. We have the same water supply as them, so our brew systems are a little different. Mine is unique in that it's direct fired. I'm not sure what Buried Acorn is. But once you get to a certain scale, that becomes really rare. Brew pubs have direct fire kettles, where there's actually a burner below the kettle.
Yeah.
But once you get up to 20, 30 plus barrels, it's steam jacketed is the norm. Okay. Which creates a little bit of different character in the beer. Buried Acorn actually might be direct fired also. But that, even just when you're talking about that kettle geometry, stuff like that, because you get caramelization from the direct fire. So that's something that you can't replicate unless you have the exact same system.
Yeah.
But I think we could probably, it might take a little bit of work, but we could probably have something that was indistinguishable between the two places.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. Again, the water source is a big thing. If you don't have the same water source, then you really need a reverse osmosis system, which is what strips the water down to bare water, and then you add the minerals back that you're looking for.
Gotcha.
Where I know neither him or I have that.
Yeah.
So we're just working with the Syracuse Municipal Water. We're really lucky here. It's almost all from Skinny House Lake. It's not super hard
I was just going to ask, do you have to filter it?
So ours just goes through a basic particulate filter and then a carbon filter.
Gotcha.
So that'll remove any chlorine that is added by the city. It'll remove any particulate that's picked up from the pipes or whatever on the way. But we really don't do much to it. The big thing we do to it is treat it with minerals and then food grade acid to get the right pH that we want.
Okay.
And people accomplish that in different ways, but Buried Acorn does the same thing.
Gotcha.
And you target a certain water profile depending on the kind of beer you're brewing. It's actually super important. Changes the mouthfeel of the beer, emphasizes different flavors. An IPA, or even just in IPAs, like a old school West Coast style IPA, has a drastically different mineral profile than a modern New England hazy IPA. So it's actually one of the most important things when you're brewing beer, which kind of makes sense. Beer is mostly water.
Yeah.
And everybody knows you go to different places, water tastes differently.
Right.
Or they have the bottled water they don't like.
Yeah.
Or it's just not something people think about when they're drinking beer.
Right.
About how important it is.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I've heard that like Myers Creek is doing a lot of contract brewing out there at the Kaz plant, and yeah, it's fun. Even thinking about like there's the Weekday Whiskey that one of the radio DJs in town he launched his own brand.
I don't even know what that is.
I think it's called Weekday Whiskey. It's Lock One distills it for him, but I forget his name. He's from like 95X or something.
Okay.
But he launched his own whiskey brand, and it's called Weekday Whiskey. And I think he only sells it in like the small like flask glass bottles maybe. But anyways, they do all of the distilling for him. It's just I'm sure he had to go and get his own, apply for all of his own licensing and all that kind of shit, get his labels and all that.
But probably needs a place to store it that's bonded and secured by the federal government. And the alcohol regulations are crazy.
There's two. Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he's created his own brand of whiskey that now he's selling, and it's just interesting to think about. Like, it's still very challenging. Obviously, I want to talk about that. So it's very challenging to sell alcohol, and sell alcohol. But at the same time, it's relatively accessible to anybody because of contract brewing.
Right.
I mean, if I came to you and said, I've got everything set, all right? Like, I don't know if you do it, but just hypothetically.
Yeah.
I could go to any brewery, most breweries in town, and say, I've got everything set. I've got my licensing and yada, yada, yada. I've got my labels and everything's approved and I've paid for everything. And I want you to brew this beer. I could go get it done.
You could.
It would maybe be a dumb idea and cost me a lot of money, but I could do it.
Yeah, so contract brewing, at least with beer, I don't know much about the hard alcohol side of it. But with beer, especially if you're just distributing, the margins are tiny.
Yeah.
So if you're contract brewing, the contract brewer has to get their margins additionally.
Yeah.
So then that's cutting into your margins while you're distributing. So you really need some serious volume.
Yeah.
To make it even worthwhile.
Yeah.
You're talking lots and lots of beer. It's thousands and thousands of barrels of beer to be able to make it worth it just for a really small team of people.
Yeah.
It's even though you don't have the overhead and such, just to be able to pay yourself, you gotta sell a lot of beer. It's people don't realize that so when I sell a case of beer or a keg of beer, I sell it to a wholesaler who then marks it up, who then sells it to a retailer who then marks it up. So, if I have a $10 six-pack on the shelf, I'm getting less than $5 for that. Because, again, it's been marked up twice. And it's expensive, the ingredients, the packaging, especially the packaging, is really expensive. Yeah. So if you want to be in the price range that most beer is, and still make a decent amount of money, you need to sell a lot of beer.
Yeah. What's a label cost you? Because you have to get every label you design has to get approved from the state, correct?
Right. So the approval process, they've actually made a lot better.
Oh, have they?
Yeah, it used to take a long time, had to be submitted, paper filing, could take months to get back at some points when they were backed up. There's actually one period of time where they cracked down on brand label registration, which it's called, and they were fining people. And so, of course, the news got out that they were actually really enforced. You know, it was kind of unenforced for a really long time. Sam Adams got over $1 million fine.
Really?
Because they only had one of their products registered in New York State. Out of, you're thinking not just the Sam Adams beer, but Truly, Angry Orchard.
Do you have to get it? So if you distribute across state lines, do you have to get that label approved in those different states?
Every state is different. Okay. So some states, if you just have the federal approval, you're good to go.
Okay.
Other states have other requirements. And some of the states' requirements are actually contradictory to each other. So there are certain states where you need to have a special label. No, it's an archaic and...
Yeah. So you can't just go find a distributor in Jersey. You have to find a distributor in Jersey and then go figure out what their rules are and make sure that you're meeting all those.
Right. So most distributors who focus on craft will either do it for the smaller brands, at least nowadays, or help you do it.
Okay.
But there's also, a lot of states have, just to be able to, export beer into that state, you have to have an exporter license, which could be $1,000 a year.
Wow.
The laws overall are getting better everywhere.
Yeah.
Again, it dates back to like pre-prohibition or shortly after prohibition laws that were meant to fight problems that don't really exist anymore. A lot of them were meant to fight tied houses where, pre-prohibition, a lot of the retailers, bars or, places that sold beer were owned by the breweries. And they could use, big business tactics to force small bars and out of business. It was so they put in laws to prevent that from happening again. Obviously, the landscape has changed now that there's thousands of breweries in the country and not just 50.
Yeah.
But a lot of those laws remained on the books, and there's a lot of people with a lot of money who want to keep those laws on the books.
Yeah.
But New York State has been pretty progressive about it. At least is getting the laws changed. There were still some things that, like the brand label registration, that just got modernized within the past couple of years.
Okay.
That was an archaic process, and that's one reason that a lot of breweries just didn't do it.
Yeah.
They didn't have their ducks in a row. Most of their beers or none of their beers were registered. And then the state started cracking down on it without also realizing that by cracking down on it, all of a sudden everybody's going to try and get in compliance. So all of a sudden they had thousands of brand labels that were not approved, not just from New York State breweries, but from breweries all over the country. And then they had to, approve this backlog that was almost 6 months long. And now they've finally updated, they've outsourced it to somebody that's not working. It's a company that does it for a lot of states.
Gotcha.
So nowadays I can submit a brand label registration today via the online portal and have it back in a couple days.
Okay. Oh, that's nice.
So yeah, it's...
Yeah. I was talking to Tim about doing one day doing a Eat Local New York collab beer with them, and we almost did one with them in 3-1 Fried, but long story, but Limp Lizard has that we're inside of. They already have a liquor license, so we don't want to and so if you go into 3-1 Fried, you have to buy your sandwich here, buy your beer there, and so we didn't want to. I go through this crazy effort to have a beer made for 3-1 Fried.
That was then sold by Limbo.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, I've talked to him about doing it, and then hearing him talk about the process of well, we've got to get the label made, and then I've got to pay for it, and I've got to register, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh, that makes me feel bad, not that he's saying that. Tim would do it in a hot second, but it's just like, holy shit, that's a process,
right?
Just to put a beer out,
right. And so if you don't order labels in large quantity,
yeah,
like if you just Tim, we're similar sized systems. I don't know what he's putting out a year or whatever, but if you just order enough labels for one batch of beer, those labels are going to be really expensive.
Yeah.
They're going to be like 25 cents a label.
Yeah, for sure.
Whereas, if I order, some of my mainstay brands, I'll, order them in a package deal.
All right.
I might pay 5 cents a label.
Yeah.
And that, when you multiply that by 24 in a case,
yeah,
all of a sudden we're talking about dollars in a case.
Yeah.
And again, you got to go through a distributor. Some of my cases go to my distributor for less than $25. So every cent per, the 1 cent on a can going up.
Yeah.
That's 24 cents on the whole package. It's every little tiny thing adds up.
Yeah.
Very quickly, and then you're talking about making a few dollars on a case of beer. It's like,
it's fucking stupid.
No, it's sometimes it's like, why are we doing this? But
yeah. Well, I'm going to ask you that at the end of the podcast, but I started a coffee company, 3 years ago. And I had Peaks doing the coffee roasting for me. Mm. It's a great setup. I, had the idea for the company and, labels made and yada, yada, yada. And the labels are, and I had the same company out of Rochester that a lot of the breweries use.
TLF.
Yeah. And by the time that you get your coffee roasted, you pay for it, you get your bag, you get your label, and then, for me, like wholesale would have been the dream come true, but really it was, I couldn't wholesale because it was part of the deal with Peaks. Like, we're not going to go sell. I'm not going to have you sell me your coffee that then I'm going to go undercut and sell to your wholesale customers or to wholesale customers that you could be getting.
Right.
And so I wound up just trying to do retail, and it's stupid. By the time you factor in shipping for a bag of coffee, because you do like a 12-ounce bag, you're just over that minimum for shipping. So to ship it, it's $7 for shipping, and nobody's gonna fucking buy a $13 bag of coffee and then $6 for shipping.
Right.
Like, only dummies do that, or purists in the coffee world. And they're not going to buy my coffee, those purists.
No, they're going to be some small roasted,
right.
like some guy, hand sourcing the beans,
right?
And, trucking them up in his pickup truck from wherever.
But the labels cost me almost as much as the coffee inside the bag did.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, it's not doing that stuff is not fun. I can't imagine being a brewery owner and having to do it with all that beer. So speaking of beer, you brought some for us. Yeah.
Brought a variety.
Yeah.
So our newest one is Just Peachy.
Okay.
This is our first take on a smoothie sour.
Okay.
So this beer is over 1/3 pureed peach.
Wow.
By volume.
Huh.
It's unfermented, so it's sweet. It's thick.
Okay.
Would you like to try it?
Yeah, sure.
Here. So I recommend rolling the can first.
All right.
Because, again, the peach ends up having solids in it.
Yeah.
So, I'll pass that over to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I've been drinking the Public House Pale Ale for like the last 3 weeks.
That's one of my favorite. That's my favorite beer that we do.
Yeah. Is that?
Yeah. It depends on my mood. But, yeah. I'm really into the Oktoberfest now, too, because we just released that.
Okay.
So that's brand new.
Yeah.
And then I also got the Rain or Shine, which is our 27th anniversary beer. So.
Okay. Yeah, I had that. I had one of those, but the Public House Pale Ale, I'm a Pale Ale fan for sure. So I've been drinking that a lot. Yeah.
So have you done the smoothie sour thing before?
Yeah. I'm typically not a fan of them.
Okay, I won't be offended.
Okay.
It's, I just figured it's our newest thing. You should probably try it.
Wow. That tastes like a peach.
Yes, that's the whole idea.
Yeah.
It's not my everyday go-to beer.
Wow.
They're really trendy right now.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see how beer evolves over time.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those people to say, like, you'll get people who are like, "This is not beer."
Yeah.
It's 1/3 fruit, like unfermented fruit, like, And I just say to them, beer is an evolving concept over time. Hundreds of years ago, hops wasn't even a thing in beer, and beer's been being made for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Fruit has always been an important thing in beer. Belgians have been using unfermented fruit in their beer for decades. The lambics that are sweetened with fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wild. Yeah, that's really good. I typically don't like them. Most of my experience with like a smoothie style beer is like way too sweet.
Yeah.
It doesn't really taste like anything but just way too sweet, whatever the fuck they put in there. But that just tastes like a peach.
Yeah, so I tend to agree with you that we tried a ton of them before we did our first one. A lot of them use a lot of lactose.
Yeah.
Which is another unfermentable sugar that adds sweetness to the beer. Typically originally used in like a milk stout to give it sweetness, but now frequently used in New England IPAs or smoothie sours. Yeah. I just don't really like lactose in beer, so we decided not to do it for this one. Now, I'm not saying we never will.
Yeah.
We came up with the name Just Peachy, and we're like, it's a cool name, and we're like, you know what? We had all these ideas of other stuff we were going to add to it, because smoothie sours tend to be heavy in adjuncts. We were talking about doing a peach cobbler beer, with cinnamon and lactose, and and then we're like, if we're going to call it Just Peachy, it should just be peach. That's like, what are we doing? So that was our first one. I'm sure we'll do more.
What's your process in coming up with a new beer?
So a lot of it's just seeing what other people are doing, seeing how where the trends are going.
Yeah.
And then figuring out our own take on it. We'll try a bunch of different styles. It's hard to be really, really original.
Yeah.
With anything food or beverage related. You got to come from some sort of starting place. So, we try a bunch, we read a lot, and then I collaborate with our head brewer. His name's Jeff Farrell. And, sometimes I'm the one who comes up with the recipe. Sometimes it's him.
Okay.
And then, we'll suggest tweaks to each other. We've been doing this for long enough that we don't usually do like a small batch trial. We can. We do. I have essentially a homebrew setup, a large homebrew setup at the brewery we've done test batches on. And then we have a larger system that we, have installed and haven't really used yet, but there's plans to use it, but it's a 2.5 barrel system.
Okay.
We're just been so busy that we got that right before COVID hit.
Gotcha.
So it was meant to be for all on premise.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And and then COVID happened. And it's like, oh, okay, well, we're kind of, put this on the side burner.
Yeah.
And
everything's on premise.
Yeah. So,
so where do you look for? I was asking some of the other guys like Andy and stuff this question, and is there a place? Is there like you were talking about like Colorado and stuff earlier? Is there a place that you look and you say, okay, this is, if I'm going to look for inspiration, if I'm going to say I want to find out what like the newest thing is happening in the country in terms of beer, I'm going to look at this place?
I'm going to say no.
Okay.
Before 10, 15 years ago, I would say the West Coast.
Yeah.
In Portland, Oregon, San Francisco, Denver. Well, it's not the West Coast, but
yeah.
And then after beer exploded everywhere, now it's like different things come out. New England IPAs are really associated with New England,
right?
And the Alchemist in Vermont, Lawson's, Fiddlehead, Treehouse. They were the innovators. But now it's done everywhere.
Yeah.
This Rain or Shine IPA, they call it a cold IPA. It's really just a modernized version of a India Pale Lager.
Okay.
Which is kind of a big thing for a while.
Yeah.
Just using modern hops, different techniques that have come out over the past 10 years. which I think it's kind of like the best form or the purest form of an IPL.
Okay.
Most of them use an adjunct, like ours uses a lot of corn to lighten the body. You allow the lager yeast to ferment at a higher temperature, which allows some of the fruity esters from the yeast that are normally suppressed by a cold fermentation to express themselves, which works well in a modern IPA that uses all these fruity hops.
Okay.
Complements them well, but you still get that like crisp finish of a lager.
Yeah.
And that was originated by somebody in San Francisco. I believe either San Francisco or San Diego. But then he was the first one to call it, he came out with it, called it a cold IPA, talked to people about it, there's blog posts here or there. Then all of a sudden everybody starts doing them. I don't know if it's something that'll be a staying force like New England IPA.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and home brewers tend to be like some of the most innovative people out there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of terrible homebrew beer.
Right, yeah.
And believe me, I've had it. But every now and then, they're able to innovate in ways that a commercial brewery can't.
Right. I was just thinking about that when you were saying that. I was thinking, like, there's probably a lot of people out there who have just decided, I'm going to take this traditional recipe and I'm going to add whatever, peaches to it, whatever the fuck I'm going to do to it. Yeah. And trying to make it, like, really innovative or interesting. And part of it probably just sucks, and then so I'm thinking, like, okay, you're gonna be the first to make the cold IPA, but then you have to go out there and sell it,
right? Yeah, as a business, that's a very important part of the equation. You can't just do whatever you want and hope it sells,
right?
You need to make product that people want to buy.
So one thing I've been really interested in, and I'm still trying to get my head around it, is, and I think it's just my personality. I'm 100% into something. So if it's changed a little bit over the past couple years, but typically, like with cocktails right now, I am all in on it.
With delicious, by the way. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good. Glad you like it. I'm all in on it. Like, I'm researching and looking at, like I just did a video on a sidecar. Well, I watched 20 videos on how to make a sidecar and found 20 different fucking recipes and, and was reading blogs on it and all that kind of stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so this is like a pure classic sidecar. So I'm interested in that. And when I go to a restaurant and they make a shitty, and I order a drink and they make it in the incorrect way, I'm thinking to myself, well, this person doesn't know what the fuck they're doing. So I'm passionate about, as a consumer, I'm passionate about what's in this. Like, you were talking earlier, you could make, whatever, a Kolsch, and one batch to the other may be a little different, right?
Sure.
So, as a consumer, I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if I could notice that. I wonder if, I go in all the time, if I could, one of the things that I'm constantly impressed at with local breweries in Syracuse is if I have their same brand multiple times in a year, if I don't notice a difference. And there's some times where I notice a difference. It's like going to a restaurant on a Monday and getting the chicken sandwich and going on a Thursday and getting the chicken sandwich, and it's completely different. So I know I'm kind of all over the place with what I'm talking about, but in my head, for a craft brewer, I'm thinking, it's got to be hard, to me, it's hard to put myself in your shoes and say, or think, I only want people that are really into it. I only want the craft beer enthusiast or purist who's going to think about, hey, this is 1/3 unfermented peaches and this is a big deal, and that kind of stuff. But in reality, the majority of your customers are probably just I don't fucking care. I just want to drink this beer and get drunk.
It tastes good. Yeah. It tastes good, and it has alcohol.
That rant was to lead up to the question: is do you struggle with that at all? Are you a
no?
Beer?
I don't struggle with it.
Okay. Tell me why.
As long as people are enjoying my product, I'm happy. And honestly, that's one of the most rewarding things about being in this business is seeing people enjoy your product, no matter what level they're into it. If it's your grandmother, and she's somebody who swears she does not like beer, and then she tries something like that, and she's like, "Oh my God, this is good."
Yeah.
And she doesn't care why it's good.
Mm-hmm.
That makes me happy. If it's somebody who's the geekiest beer geek you've ever met, and they want to talk to me about fermentation temperatures and water profiles and whatever else, as long as they enjoy my product, that's so rewarding to see something that you make, is hands-on, that I'm involved with every day. And to see them enjoy it, that's all I care about. I don't care about why you enjoy it. I just like to see you enjoy it,
Do you get a lot of those at Middle Ages?
What do you mean?
Like the geeky purists?
So the geeky purists make up a small percentage of beer drinkers.
Yeah.
Like 10 to 20% is probably pretty generous of beer drink. I mean,
in general or here?
In general.
Okay.
Yeah, most people who drink beer, and even craft beer, it used to be that a bigger percentage of craft beer drinkers were the people who were really into it.
Yeah.
But now it's, you get tons of people who don't know much about it. They just know they like IPAs. They know they like hoppy beers. They know they like sours. They know they like wheat beers.
Yeah.
And that's all they know. They don't really care to know more.
Yeah.
Which, I'm the same way with some things.
Yeah.
Like, wine.
Yeah.
I know a decent about wine, probably more than the average person, just because it's alcohol and I know how the process works, and inherently you learn about, different alcoholic products being in the industry. But I know, I like dry red wine.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I couldn't tell you why I like one better than the other one.
Yeah.
I tell you I don't like sweet wine.
Right. Yeah.
There are categories where a coffee is another example.
Yes.
Where I enjoy good coffee, but I couldn't really tell you why I like one cup of coffee more than another cup of coffee.
Yeah. I mean, I love coffee, but I go to Dunkin' Donuts just about every morning,
Fair enough. Yeah.
Big Mike from IBU used to do that all the time. If you didn't know what kind of beer that you wanted, he would say, "Well, how do you drink your coffee?" And then he would suggest something from there.
Right, which I've always thought that was Mike was one of the smartest people in the beer scenes around here.
Yeah.
Once I started to take over in the brewing process, like for my parents, he was somebody I consulted with working on water profiles, the mineral additions, because he just was, and it was before I really knew much about it, before I had really gotten taken over the brewing process at Middle Ages.
Yeah.
He was super, super insightful, and just wanted to spread his knowledge. Like that was, so he was a huge asset to the brewing community in the area. And it's unfortunate that he's, not really involved anymore.
I know. It's so IBU was like the first craft brewery that I got involved with Eat Local, and it helped that they were 10 minutes from my house, probably one of the closest. But so that was one of the first ones. I still have a video saved on my phone of my wife and Mike getting into an argument. She was drunk at the CNY, or what was the beer fest at the fairgrounds? That's in the wintertime.
I think it's CNY Beer Fest.
Is it? Okay. Yeah. So her and him getting into an argument about the scientific viability of breaking the seal, and and she's drunk and in his face and pointing, and I miss IBU a lot.
I can see Mike having that argument. I imagine he was on there's no validity to it.
Yes.
It's side, and
and
your wife was at no, it happens. It's a real thing. I completely imagine. I can visualize it in my head.
Him and Saul. I mean, I loved Saul's beers.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just because I always drank them at 7 a.m. when I was at the regional market.
Right.
And there's just something about a 7 a.m. beer that's better than every other one.
Right. It's a good excuse to have a beer.
Yeah, exactly. But his New York Golden Ale, I think that's what it was called. I mean, just some, that changed a lot, but I loved Saul's beers.
He was one of the people just in it for the passion. I mean, I'm not sure he had a viable business.
Right.
I just from not knowing anything about like his numbers or anything like that, but just I know about beer and how hard it is to make money selling beer.
Yeah.
And is he still doing it?
No. So he stopped. He was selling at the regional market, and as far as I understand, he only had one wholesale account, and that was 317 at Montgomery Street, because he was friends with Joel and Natalie.
Okay.
I think they all went to high school together, and so he was selling to them, which was like, holy shit, you guys have his fucking beers. And so he's not doing it anymore. I think he stopped over a year ago, but he's over at UBL right now.
Okay.
So he's like a co-brewer or whatever the case is over at Underground. Mm-hmm. And from what I understand, at least, eventually they're going to re-release some of his beers through that system.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I loved his beers a lot.
Yeah, no, again, he was somebody who's so passionate, very knowledgeable, and brewing beers that just because he liked them, you know, like it was, and because they were good beers. Like he wasn't the one to chase a New England IPA or to, again, an English style golden ale. Yeah, is not something that's ever going to set the world on fire.
Right, but there's something about maybe it's just me because I used to smoke cigarettes and listen to a lot of sad music. There's something about a large glass bottle of beer that can't be resealed. I mean, no beers can be resealed, but there's just something about a large bottle. Like, you have to sit there and spend your time with it. Mm-hmm. You can't just crack the can and down it and move on to the next. You can't just get a pint of it. If you're opening that bottle, you're going to be there for a little bit drinking it, or you're going to waste it. And, who wants to do that?
Yeah, no, it was what he did was very unique.
Yeah,
it was, and I think he's probably one of the most respected people in the area. Yeah, beer wise, because of that. It's that he really put his passion into it. You know, it was almost like it wasn't a business.
Right.
It was just, I mean, it was a business, but it was also a passion project. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe it's the two drinks or I don't know what, but I'm starting to get sad talking about this, so let's move on. So what's the history of Middle Ages? I mean...
So my parents started it in 1995, my mom and dad. My dad had come from a scrap metal business that his parents owned, and they sold in the early 90s. And he knew that he wanted to go into business for himself. And my mom decided that she wanted to be involved also. This is kind of when home brewing and craft beer was first taking off. Okay. And so he was home brewing at the time. And then he ended up seeing an advertisement for a brewer's holiday kind of thing. In outside of Portland, Maine, and Kennebunkport, Maine. Was I think it's Kennebunkport Brew Pub, but I might be wrong about the name there. But basically, you came up for a week and learned how beer was brewed on a commercial scale or a brew pub scale.
Oh, that's cool.
So he did it, loved it. Met the owner, who was Alan Pugsley, who's very influential in the American brewing scene. Yeah. And then Alan also owned a production brewery in Shipyard. So Alan and my dad became friends. And, my dad decided that he wanted to go into the beer industry. So he ended up interning at Shipyard Brewing Company in Portland, Maine, which was also owned by Alan. Yeah. And then... just went for it and decided to open a brewery in Syracuse. We were the first production brewery to open in Syracuse since Haberly Brewing Company had closed in I believe the 60s. Empire had opened, but they were in planning at the same time. Okay. The original Empire Brewing Company, I believe, opened about 6 months before we did. Okay. But we're the first, production brewery, putting beer into bottles at the time. Yeah. And distributing in kegs and stuff like that. everybody at the time thought he was crazy. He had trouble finding somebody who would, even though they had the financing.
Yeah.
He had trouble finding somebody to rent to him because he was turned down a few different times because they're like, "What are you, crazy? Like, this is not going to work. You're not going to be able to pay rent." Then we finally found our place, which was in the old Steel Test ice cream factory.
Okay.
Where we are till today. We've expanded the footprint over time there.
How old were you when that happened?
I was 5 when they opened the brewery.
Jesus.
Yeah. So I grew up there.
Okay.
I remember spending weekends there because, they kind of, there was a little break room where they set me up with a TV and a Super Nintendo. And, my mom or dad would have to be working. Sometimes my dad would be delivering beer on a Saturday to Buffalo or Rochester, wherever they could sell beer at the time because it was a struggle. And my mom would be there working the tasting room, which at the time was just a tasting room.
Yeah.
You weren't allowed to sell beer by the glass.
Really?
That didn't happen until fairly recent. That didn't happen until, 8 or 10 years ago. I can't remember the exact date.
What?
Yeah. So as a brewer, if you just had a brewery license, a microbrewery license.
Oh, okay.
Before the farm license existed.
Yeah.
You weren't allowed to sell a glass of beer to a customer.
That's nuts.
You could do tasting or you could sell beer to go.
Huh.
And the tasting had to be limited, only a few ounces and
free.
I don't know if it had to be free. That was the standard at the time.
Okay.
That everything was free. It was because breweries popping up, your marketing people have no idea what craft beer is.
Right.
So to get them to try your beer, you had to give it away for free.
Yeah.
So that's what we did for 20 years. We gave away free tastings and then sold beer to go.
What was that like? I mean, being 5 years old, your parent. I mean, I don't know if you have vivid memories of being 5, but I mean, what's that like growing up and your parents own this, brew house?
Well,
brewery?
so at first I didn't really have any understanding of what was going on. They told me, we're opening a brewery.
Yeah.
And they're explaining it to me. And of course, my first question is, are you going to make soda too? And they're like, no, we're not going to do that. But I had it in my head, things you'd see on TV, like, I don't know, Modern Marvels on the History Channel or whatever. I imagined some like huge production facility with, Laverne and Shirley style, like just bottles being pumped out every second. And when you're a small brewery, that's not what it's like.
Yeah.
So honestly, when I was, 5 or 6 years old, the first time I saw it, I'm like, oh, this isn't nearly as cool as I thought it was going to be.
It was probably like the size of your, small batch or something?
Well, no. So we opened with the same system we have now.
Really?
Yeah. Back then, again, distribution was what we figured all we'd be doing.
Yeah.
The on-premise thing wasn't even really a thing back then. That was kind of a surprising thing to my parents when they realized how much people want to come into the brewery and buy. Even back then, just beer. It was growler fills.
Yeah.
And just the few brands we had in 6-packs. That was a surprise to them. Ends up being a huge mainstay of the business. Like a part of the business that without it, we couldn't succeed as a business without that direct-to-consumer sales.
Oh, yeah.
If we were just distribution, it wouldn't be a viable business.
No.
We rely on that, the higher margin direct-to-consumer sales to actually make it worth it. We're not big enough that we could rely on just distribution.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the beginning. So, yeah, no, they struggled for quite a long time. Then eventually, and couldn't tell you the exact year, things started to really take off. They came out with Syracuse Pale Ale, which is today still our best seller. It's on tap. There's a point where you couldn't find a restaurant where it wasn't on tap. Things have changed a little bit now where, everybody wants something different all the time. Back then, nobody rotated their tap handles.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's not unusual for even a regular restaurant, not even craft beer specialty.
Yeah.
To change what's on tap every keg.
Yeah.
Or to change what's on tap. They might have a few mainstays, but, 7 out of 10 of their list, they're going to rotate every keg or every 2 kegs.
Yeah.
Where back then it was, your tap list was your tap list.
Right.
So there was a period of time where Syracuse Pale Ale was on tap pretty much everywhere. And that was the flagship that, built the brewery into what it, became, what made it successful. And then, over time they added on, the 22-ounce bombers, Wailing Wench, Dragon Slayer became kind of like cult hits, even then where we, only distributed locally or in New York State or a little bit in surrounding states, there'd be people from across the country who knew about Dragon Slayer, knew about, Wailing Wench or some of these, higher end, more unique beers that we were doing at the time.
Those are big beers for me. Like even when I was younger, when I was like, I can remember in high school being in a Wegmans or wherever and seeing those bottles,
right?
And I mean, even then it was like, wow, this is a very cool thing, before I was legally drinking beer,
right? So yeah, that kind of that made a name for us, like in the beer world. Mm-hmm. And then, Syracuse Pale Ale kind of made a name for us locally.
Yeah.
And then I became involved in 2012 after I graduated college. When I went to college, I did not have any interest in being involved with the company. And then as any other college student would be like, oh, my parents own a brewery, I should probably want to be involved with this. My parents were, I'm fortunate enough that my parents said, hey, finish your degree, and then you can still come work with us.
Were you able to, like, drink a lot in high school and stuff like that?
No, my parents were, I mean, I'm not going to say it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But no, they were good parents. It wasn't like a free-for-all. Like, I didn't have a key to the place till I was 18 years old. Okay. So, like, it wasn't like, again, I'm not going to say there wasn't a beer had here or there.
Right, for sure.
When I was in college, they pretty much let me take whatever I wanted, but no, they were responsible with that.
Yeah.
So then at some point in college, I don't know if it was after my freshman year or whatever, I was like, I think I just want to work for you guys, and they said, sure, but finish your degree. We think that's important. But then after college, I came and started working for them, and at first I was just bartending. I was making our mix packs, entry level stuff. My first decision with the company was that we should be open on Sundays. So I worked Sundays for the first 3 or 4 years that I, came back after I was working for them. Then I started taking over roles for my mom. And then eventually, I started getting involved in the brewing process. I started doing some home brewing to learn about it. Learned a lot from my dad. Read all of the classic beer literature that everybody needs to read. There's, a handful of books that are just considered, if you're going to be a brewer, you should read these books.
Yeah.
Even though knowledge has changed, the foundational knowledge in those books is still foundational knowledge.
Yeah.
And then there was a guy who worked for us. His name was Jess. He was, our head brewer at the time. And I learned a ton from him. He ended up eventually moving on to Tired Hands outside of Philadelphia.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
And then, who were very innovative. And then now he works for Industrial Arts.
Oh, wow.
Who makes like Wrench. He's their director of production there. But it was around the time that he left that I kind of, took the bull by its horns and said, hey, these are changes I want to make. And my dad let me. And so that was kind of when we first started to come out with like newer beers. Like first time we did New England IPAs. First time we brewed beer with different yeast. We'd always used a yeast called Ringwood, which dates back to when Shipyard Brewing Company and Alan Pugsley. That was how, my dad brought him on as a consultant and the brewery builder for when he built the brewery. And that yeast is all done in open fermentation. It's a yeast that's continuously repitched over and over again and had been continuously repitched in a brewery setting for like 160 years at that point. Whereas the norm for modern breweries is you harvest these from the bottom of these, like, the conical tanks that you've seen in every brewery. And they get repitched a handful of times, which could range anywhere between a few times and, a dozen times. Then you buy a fresh pitch yeast from the lab. Whereas this yeast had been continuously repitched for, 150 years, 160 years.
That's wild.
So eventually we brought in some of the cylindrical tanks and started using different yeasts, which allowed us to do beers that we never did before. Can't really do a modern IPA in an open fermenter with Ringwood. It just doesn't come out good.
Yeah.
Ringwood was great for certain beers, but just did not work in other beers. Then around 5 years ago is when we opened the new tap room, and because they made it legal to sell beer direct to consumers by the glass.
Yeah.
Just if you have a regular brewery license, you could do it.
Yeah.
So that was a huge change for us. And we opened the new tap room. And then COVID happened, which, changes everything for everybody. That was actually when we got rid of Ringwood and the old brewing system. The old brewing system we have, the old fermenters that we had.
Gotcha.
We still the hot side, which is where the beer is mashed in with the grains and boiled. That's all still the same. But we no longer use any open fermenters. We brought in more cylindrical tanks.
Okay.
And we don't use Ringwood at all anymore. And the real reason we decided to do that, we had been talking about this for, at this point, years, getting rid of it. At this point, our flagship still used it, SPA and a bunch of other beers. But our production went down so much right at the beginning of COVID because we leaned so much towards on-premise sales, like on our on-premise, and then on-premise sales for bars and restaurants.
Yeah.
Usually smaller breweries tend to lean more towards that. Whereas, the bigger you get, the more you sell in package.
Yeah.
And the more you sell at grocery stores and, off-premise.
Yeah.
So it got to the point where we weren't going to be able to brew enough to keep Ringwood alive. So it was like, okay, I guess this is the nail in the coffin. We're going to stop using Ringwood. Which I think was, was a decision that was going to happen no matter what.
Yeah.
That was a trend we were going on. Again, a lot of the modern beers just don't work. Well, you can't brew a lager with Ringwood yeast. Can't brew a New England IPA with it.
Yeah.
Or at least a good one. You can't brew a good one with it. But no, that was actually what made us do it.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Huh. What's it like to? Do you have any feel this sense of responsibility or I don't want to say to keep the torch burning, but as the oldest brewery in Syracuse, do you look at yourself as the older brother?
Yeah, a little bit. There's a lot of people who've come to me with questions.
Yeah.
Again, I grew up in the industry. I feel that I'm fairly knowledgeable about stuff. And we're just, especially, now there's some bigger people who've opened.
Yeah.
But for a long time, we were the biggest brewery in Syracuse. So
Fuck
a lot of times I was the person people called oh, I ran out of this.
Yeah.
And we still do that for other people. And I do that too. I call people I'm out of wheat.
Yeah.
Because my delivery's delayed.
Yeah.
And we're brewing a beer that, I need 5 bags of wheat for. So I'll call Tim at Buried Acorn or Billy at Heritage Hill or Ivan at Myers Creek, and they're like, "Yeah, come get it."
Yeah,
but
that's crazy.
No, it's great how collaborative and friendly everybody is in the industry.
Yeah,
because I know most industries are not like that.
Yeah,
I know there are others that are. I know at least some restaurants are like that.
Right.
I know not all of them are, and still you get breweries that aren't like that too.
Yeah,
there are some breweries you can't call up and just, hey, can I borrow this? They'd be like, no. But but most of them, 90% of them, if they can do something to help you out, they will.
Yeah.
So
that's always surprised me. It used to be more collaborative downtown than I think it is now. It still is to a certain extent. I'd imagine if you're pretty much anybody and you called somebody like David Hoyne, he's going to lend you a cup of sugar.
Yes.
And so I remember, Cody from Deefy would talk about that a lot, how he would, connect with other restaurant owners and chefs in downtown about working on different products. And I've always been surprised about that, to hear Tim from Buried Acorn say that. He was always Myers Creek opens up around the corner. To me, I'm like, fuck them. Why the hell would you do that? And for Tim, he's like, who cares? Open up another one. Like his view is the more breweries, craft breweries that there are, the more people are going to get into craft beer.
Yeah. I mean, what's that saying? Rising tides raise all ships.
Yeah.
That's definitely true. Yeah. I mean, of course, everybody's competition too. Mm-hmm. But I agree with Tim. It's in general, there's still more people to convert to craft beer than to worry about competition.
All right.
We're not a place like Denver or Portland, Oregon, where there's 200 breweries in the city limits. It's where there's still only a couple dozen in the area.
Yeah.
There is room for more. I don't know exactly when that limit's going to be. We're a smaller population. But I don't know exactly what that limit's going to be.
Yeah.
But again, the more people who are into craft beer, the better it is for every brewery.
Yeah, Big Mike used to always say that. He would say, I'm not competing against Full Bore or this person or that person. We're all competing against, Budweiser, Anheuser-Busch and Miller. And, if they could get 1% of that market share, it'd be amazing. Do you think there is, is there a certain number you think where it's like, okay, we've gotten too many now in Syracuse?
So, of course there is. But I don't think of it like a hard limit. Mm-hmm. I kind of think of it like a mature industry. Kind of like what any other, like the restaurant industry.
Yeah.
Of course, there's a certain limit to the amount of restaurants any typical area can support.
Yeah.
So it's just going to become like that industry where restaurants come and go. Mm-hmm. You're already starting to see that with breweries, breweries closing. So it's not going to be like there's a hard limit.
Yeah.
But eventually, of course, you can only support so many breweries. So it'll be the ones that are, successful or better at marketing or, whatever. Like those are the ones who survive, and you'll see some close. You'll see some open up. You'll see some new ones open up and fail.
Yeah.
I don't think we're at that number yet.
Yeah.
But again, I wouldn't call it a hard limit. Mm-hmm. And again, there's different models for breweries that work. Like for example, Pete at Eastwood Brewing Company, mm-hmm. he's a 1-barrel system, pretty much only direct to consumer.
Yeah.
I mean, he does have some other, some accounts that he sells beer to, but pretty much just selling pints across the bar.
Right.
Or growler fills to go.
Yeah.
Very low overhead. So he's essentially a neighborhood bar that makes his own beer.
Yeah, right.
And how many of those can you support? A lot. Depending on certain neighborhoods.
I think it would be cool to see. I'm not saying that like the majority. I'm not saying I would like to see the majority of Syracuse go this way, but it would be cool, and it gets back to viability and finances and if you're going to make money or not. More small setups, I think, pop up, that are like focused on, hey, we're putting out like this small number of really craft beers, high end beer, whatever the case is. That'd be cool to see, Yeah,
I think that kind of goes back to what we were touching on earlier.
Yeah.
Where Syracuse tends to be a little bit behind the trends.
Yeah.
I think in some bigger cities, or at least trendier beer areas, you're already seeing places that super, super special. Like they're only doing barrel-aged beers. Mm-hmm. Or they're only doing, like these certain type of sours. Or they're only doing these IPAs or stouts or whatever, and they're selling out every weekend. They're only producing a small amount. I think UBL is actually kind of like an example of a place that's doing that. He's putting out these awesome IPAs. That's mostly all he does.
Yeah.
I mean, he does do other beers, of course. But, very small setup.
Yeah.
Direct to consumer. Mm-hmm. Again, I don't know how many of those are viable in Syracuse right now.
Yeah.
Just like, I don't know how many super high-end restaurants are viable in Syracuse right now. You got Eden, you got St. Urban.
Amano, I would sort of put in that level, but they're not high-end, but, I mean, their quality is, but they're not.
Yeah, the quality is there. Yeah. but it's super specialized.
Yeah.
Like St. Urban Wine Bar, just like it's like you feel like you're in New York City.
Yeah.
Eden, this ultra unique concept. Yeah. Everything's grilled over real wood,
right
in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think Syracuse can't handle many of those concepts right now by any stretch of the imagination. And yeah, I don't really know what the next wave is going to be in Syracuse and when it comes to food and restaurants and that kind of stuff, because I don't know what that next wave is going to be. I think we kind of, I don't know if it's graciously, but we've kind of skipped over the ghost kitchen, virtual kitchen phase. There's some that are doing it. Funk and Waffles is doing a massive virtual kitchen business.
What is theirs?
So they've got like three or four different concepts operating out of their kitchen that is just on Grubhub and DoorDash.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so like the two of them are like breakfast concepts, like breakfast sandwich concepts. Yeah, so they're doing it. John's doing it at 3 Lives with Monkey Brains.
Obviously, you're doing it.
So we are and we aren't. We're technically not any of that.
Oh, really?
Explain to me. Yeah, so we're a restaurant. We're just a restaurant inside of a restaurant. We're like a KFC Taco Bell combo.
Okay.
Because you can. So the difference is a ghost kitchen. A ghost kitchen would be like in this room. There's 4 kitchens in here, like 4 identical kitchen spaces, and there's 4 different restaurants operating in this one room, and they only operate through Grubhub and DoorDash.
Okay.
So that's a ghost kitchen.
Understood.
You can't show up and pick it up. You can't show up and dine in. You can only get it there. A virtual kitchen is a restaurant operates one or multiple other restaurants out of its kitchen that are different concepts that are only available on delivery.
Okay.
So that's like a Monkey Brain situation.
Right. So you can't go into 315 or 3 Lives and order.
I don't know if you can or not. That's a good question. I haven't been there since he started Monkey Brains, but I don't think that you can go there. You might be able to, but I don't think that you can go there and order off the Monkey Brains menu and sit there and eat it. I think you have to get it for delivery or pickup. So that's like a virtual kitchen.
Okay.
We just exist inside of Limp Lizard because Mad Burger, who Michelle from the Brasserie had opened up during the pandemic, she had hired me to like do the brand development for that, and so I helped come up with the name. I did the logo. She kind of had the menu already in place, and she had the kitchen and all that kind of stuff. And then I did all the social media marketing.
That's no longer operating?
That was only open for 2 weeks.
Wow.
She realized really quickly that A, the Brasserie couldn't really operate without her there, and B, she had staffing issues. Like she had hired 3 cooks for Mad Burger, and one of them she fired, and the other one just didn't show up after the first day. And so, but she sold out of food like every day, her first week. I mean, it was very, very busy. So because I had done that, I'm friends with Nick, who runs Limp Lizard. He was like, we should do, my North Syracuse location is slow. We should come up with a ghost kitchen that we could run out of there. And so we were tossing ideas back and forth. And I've had the name for 3-1 Fried for like 4 years. I wanted to do 3-1 Fried as a focused on takeout and delivery, but it would, in my head, it was like it would have like 3 or 4 tables or bar stools in there at a counter. We would do really rare craft beers, and we would just do really great fried chicken and sides. And so after like a few months of us just going back and forth, should we do a ghost kitchen? Should it be a burger concept? I was finally like, we could do 3-1 Fried. And he was like, I love that name. Let's do it. And so then we went to work on figuring out the recipes and all that kind of stuff. So, but you can walk in, order at 3-1, like you walk in, there's 3 cash registers. 2 of them are Limp Lizard. 1 of them's 3-1 Fried. So you just walk up to the counter and order. You can sit there and eat it, get it for takeout, call us for delivery, whatever. So that makes us just a regular restaurant.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. It sounds bad, but
honestly, that sounds like a more viable long-term concept to me than ghost kitchens.
Yeah.
In general.
Yes.
So,
people in Syracuse haven't really grasped the ghost kitchen, virtual kitchen thing yet. You know, they want to be able to say, this is the person that owns it. Here's where they live. Here, here's what they look like.
Yeah.
You know, Syracuse is still very old school when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Very old school.
You know.
Yeah.
But this trend was, I've been working with the restaurants that have been doing this in Rochester 4 years ago, that were doing fried chicken sandwiches inside of another restaurant as a pop-up or inside of a bar that had a kitchen. They started it 4 years ago.
Wow.
We're just getting it in Syracuse. The argument could be made that SoFly started doing it out of XO, but they definitely started before us. But the argument could be made that they were kind of that sort of a concept.
Mm-hmm.
And they were.
Can you order that there?
Yes.
Okay.
You can go to XO, sit down, and order SoFly or Flybird. I think they changed the name.
They did.
Yeah. And it's not a bad chicken sandwich. You know, it's not hand breaded, but it's still a good, tasty with the toppings on it. It's still a decent chicken sandwich. But yeah, Syracuse just hasn't gotten on that thing yet. So for restaurants like us, it's great because no one is getting paid from it. We pay Limp Lizard, like we cover a quarter of the expenses of Limp Lizard. So when it comes to like the bills, payroll, all that kind of stuff, and then plus our food. So for us, it's great. Me and the two partners, we don't take a paycheck from it, and we're just putting the money aside. And next year, we hope to either have a place near downtown where it's more like a Buffalo-style spot that has a great bar and great craft beer and also does great food, or to have a food truck. So, and you know,
which is another thing Syracuse was way behind on.
Yeah.
Food trucks.
Yeah.
Then they kind of exploded.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know,
yeah.
5 years ago, there were hardly any food trucks.
I know. Yeah.
It was like Toss and Fire and Chicken Bandit.
Yeah. PB&J. Yeah.
Was she even around 5? Yeah, I think she was.
Yeah, she was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
that was like it.
Yeah.
Like, and now all of a sudden there's so many of them.
Yeah. I'm great. There is a lot of great food trucks today that exist.
Yeah.
And a lot of great looking food trucks, because 5 years ago, half of them were converted U-Haul trailers, and they looked like shit.
Some of those are still around.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, nowadays. But I will say it's impossible to book a food truck these days.
Yes. Well, I mean, they want to make. I mean, we can get them for really busy days at the brewery. You know, when we do concerts, like especially the outdoor concerts we do.
Yeah.
We get food trucks for that, but I think especially with our location, there's so many food options around.
Yeah.
And then we've been around for so long that people got used to, you know, either we're a first stop or a last stop. And then, you know, within 5 blocks, there's dozens of restaurants near us. So it's like, you know, on a Friday night or a Thursday night, even if we're busy, they won't do enough money for it to be viable for them to be there.
Right.
So unless we have like a legit event, you know, event that's going to draw hundreds of people.
Yeah.
They, you know, most of them have deemed it not worth it for them to be, you know.
Oh yeah.
Where we are. Whereas you look at like a brewery like 3 and 5. There's not there.
They're always going to be busy with food trucks.
Right. Because that's all there is there.
Right.
You know, it's actually the closest. I live out in Warner's.
Okay.
So it's the closest place. If there's a food truck there.
Yeah.
It's the closest place for me to go get a beer and a drink, or a beer and food.
Huh.
You know, if they, you know, on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, or whatever.
Yeah. That's wild.
And there's a lot of people who live out in that area.
Yeah. That's what I want to own next. I want to own a farm. I want to own like an attraction-based farm.
Yeah. So that seems to be. I never would have guessed what agro-tourism would have like become. It reminds me of that Office episode where, you know, you watch Office.
Oh yes, I was just watching it this morning.
Yeah, where you know, Dwight talks about the agro-tourism at his farm, and it's like I never would have imagined how
it's nuts
how well these places do. You know, like Beacon Skiff, Heritage Hill.
Yeah,
it's just, you know, you go out there on a weekend from you know, late spring to late fall.
Right.
You can get thousands of people out there.
Yeah, hell yeah. And if you're lucky, if you're like, I mean, I don't know what Beacon Skiff does in the wintertime, but Heritage Hill has that massive restaurant.
Right. They still do well.
Yeah.
But, I mean, just, again, the amount of people I see out there.
It's stupid.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And again, 10 years ago, around here, 10 years ago, I never would have imagined it would be like this.
All right.
Beacon Skiff didn't have the distillery or the cidery.
Yeah.
It was just the regular farm thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's, there was Critz Farms, which was a fraction of what it is now. I never would have imagined the way it would have blown up.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's I was just talking with Kevin and Rockney about that today when I was up there, and it really is wild how much possibilities there are. The one thing that I've learned, and like Nick and I are starting. We've done a couple bar crawls this past year, but now we've started an official events company. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to put on like a dozen of our own events throughout the year. And then we're going to get into like running events for other companies, like other restaurants and stuff in town. But it's amazing to think now, like as the progression of me figuring out how to make money in the food industry has gone over the last 7 years. Unfortunately, I'm just now starting to get a tiny grasp on how to make money in the food industry. It's like you need space. Well, you guys are doing it. You're building that event space
right,
upstairs,
yeah, we're
right?
building. It was a logical step for us. We're building like a 7,500 square foot event space above where we are. It's going to mainly be for private events. Mm-hmm. But we'll also do some concerts up there.
That's awesome.
And then we'll also do whatever, we're talking about. So there's going to be kind of like two areas. The front, like bar area, kind of like more like a lounge.
Okay.
And then the back is just a big open space where there'll be a stage. And we're talking about during, anytime there is an event, that'll be a game room.
That's cool. Like
a couple pool tables, indoor cornhole league in the winter.
Yeah.
Endless possibilities. It's just, again, as I mentioned earlier, direct to consumer sales. It's
yeah. It's that's got to be interesting for you because you're probably the of all the local craft breweries, you probably have the largest distribution of all of them.
Yeah, for sure. Myers Creek does all the contract.
Yeah,
but that's different. Somebody pays you to make beer.
All right.
Then you send that beer out and it goes out to market.
Yeah.
As far as like personal distribution, I would say we're, right in Onondaga County. Not counting Budweiser.
Yeah.
We're the largest. So
yeah.
But again, that has changed so much. Mm-hmm. I mentioned the tap handle rotation before.
Right.
But we're competing against every new brand that opens. Mm-hmm. We're competing against brands that are coming to this market for the first time.
Yeah. Competing
against the national brands. Mm-hmm. And then the same way, so there's so much more competition in our home market. And in the same way, like it makes it harder for us to go into any other market as a small regional brewery. Yeah. Like if I want to try and sell beer in Rochester, I'm competing against the dozens of local breweries in Rochester. I'm competing against the regional brands, the big regional brands, let's say, Saranac, Southern Tier, who are many times the size that we are.
Right.
And then I'm competing against the national brands.
Yeah.
And it just, again, the margins aren't there for me to support a sales person in the area.
Yeah.
Like I would have to, put a salesperson out in the area who'd have to sell 50,000 CEs, case equivalents, just to break even.
Yeah. Huh.
To pay for somebody's salary and spend, everything that costs to have an employee.
Yeah.
So, while we are available statewide, it doesn't make sense for us to put somebody on the road selling our product outside our market. We have a sales manager who also acts as like a sales rep. Jeff, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it makes sense for us to have him in our home market. And he does make out-of-market trips. Mm-hmm. But to put somebody on full-time to try and sell a lot of beer outside this area, the return on investment is just, it's unimaginable to get there.
See, my thinking has shifted as someone who's now buying and selling beer.
Yeah.
Because in my head, I'm thinking to myself, all right, I've got friends that I want to carry their beer. Like, I want to carry as much Buried Acorn as I can. I want to carry, so like I want to carry Underground Beer Lab because that's an easy story. Even though it's wildly expensive, I can bring it in. I can be like, hey, you see that can over there? That's the hardest thing to get in Syracuse right now. And they're like, oh, really? I'll take it. So I'm looking for beers that like either they're friends of mine and I just want to support them, or beers that I know I can have a story to sell. Because 90% of the people that do buy beer from me, as they're standing at the cooler, I'm standing behind the bar going through can by can, trying to sell them on each one,
Right.
And so for me, I looked at when I was going through, like, we were a big OnBev buyer. So not big, we're probably the smallest account that they have, but
they're smaller. I'm sure they're smaller.
Yeah. But we buy mostly from OnBev. And so I'm bringing in brands like, Lake Placid, and, there's a couple others, Adirondack Brewing Company, because in my head, I'm thinking to myself, okay, most people that are coming to the bar are going to be from Baldwinsville. Most of those people have already seen these brands. Like they can go get Middle Ages and Buried Acorn and Willow Rock and at Full Bore anytime they want in a short drive. I want to bring in the stuff.
Or at a grocery store.
Right.
Right, yeah.
I want to bring in the stuff they haven't, like, they don't even know exists. Like, I brought in Ubu, from Lake Placid or whatever it is, thinking there's a fucking dog on that thing, on that can. It's a short can, which sells better. Like, I'm going to sell this in no time. I brought in like 4 cases of it. I think I've sold 2 cans, and
Ubu used to be huge in this area.
Really?
Yeah, Ubu used to be like probably a top craft SKU.
Really?
Yeah, going back 10 years ago or plus.
Wow.
It was on tap everywhere.
Huh.
It was, interestingly enough, so Saranac owns that brand.
Do they really?
Yeah. So Lake Placid is only the brew pub now.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And so I think they were getting it. I think they were getting it contract brewed at Saranac.
Wow.
And then at some point, Saranac offered to buy the brand from them.
That's wild.
And so everything distribution from, at least with Ubu, I don't know about the whole Lake Placid brand.
Yeah.
But everything distribution is owned by them.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
So I only know about them because I was up in Lake Placid last year for like a 2-day visit and went there, and, it's like, this is our flagship beer, and, I had it there and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to sell the shit out of this beer.
Yeah.
And it's cheap, so it's even better.
Well, that's one of the reasons it's cheap. It's made by Saranac. Yeah. the second biggest craft brewery in the state. So.
Yeah. Tim has told me, which I tell most of my customers now, is that that beer has a gold medal for the beer that no one drinks. And I tell people that, and I laugh, and they don't ever laugh at that joke. But it is interesting. We do get people that travel because, at the bar out of Abbott's, they're a Harvest Host site. So it's a place for people to park their RVs for a night.
Okay.
And they probably have 20 people, I'd say, a week that are like 20 different groups that come in and out. And so it is cool. They come into the bar, and I can like sell them craft beer that they're going to take back home. Like this woman was just in there the other day getting 2 4-packs for her. They're traveling around the country, but she has a beer club that meets in Cleveland, where she's from. And so she got like 8 different cans to bring back and share with her club. So that was cool to be like, hey, listen, get that Middle Ages and get that Full Bore and get that Willow Rock and get that Buried Acorn, and going through them with her was kind of fun. But yeah, so I thought that would work, like bringing in stuff that people haven't seen or heard of. It has not worked at all.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, no, not in one tiny little bit.
Again, you're coming in from out of the area.
Yeah.
And it's like people want local.
Yeah.
Or they want what they know.
So, like, to me, I'm thinking to myself, you'd probably have an easier time selling in Rochester because, hey, it's another craft brewery from New York State, and they're coming into Rochester, and you can get away from all the stuff that you've been drinking and try this new beer.
There's just so many options, know, that are just from Rochester.
That are good.
And, yeah, right, that are great. there is tons of great beer out there nowadays.
Yeah.
It's, tons of it. I'm not
Right.
going to say there isn't bad beer.
Yeah.
Of course there's bad beer. But there's tons of good stuff. And there's tons of great beer made in Rochester or the Rochester area.
Yeah.
We're a little lucky with that market and like Western New York in general, in that we've been around for so long that we're known. Mm-hmm. But we're not trendy,
Yeah.
I mean, we our trendy stuff. It's like, because of course we try and keep up and do plenty of new stuff.
Yeah.
But to get the word out there in a market that we're not a major presence in,
Yeah.
is really hard.
Yeah.
And again, the amount of effort or money, etc., that would be to sell a significant volume there is just, it's not viable.
Yeah. How important is having Jeff?
Very important. I'm running the business. Mm-hmm. I was canning today. I do, I wear many hats.
Yeah.
Some of that is sometimes sales. But to have somebody that's in accounts every day is essential.
Yeah.
And I just don't have enough time to do that.
Yeah.
There's no way that I could. I mean, he visits a dozen accounts a day or more.
Wow.
And, I can't tell you how many times people tell me, oh, he's the best sales rep that we deal with. Yeah. And it's, well, one of it's because he's a great guy.
Yeah.
And he cares about what he does. But two, he's only local. Mm-hmm. For a craft beer brand to have a beer rep that only does Onondaga County and the surrounding area, the surrounding handful of counties around here, is unbelievably unique. Mm-hmm. It's most local breweries don't have a craft rep. Yeah. It's the owners. Yeah. Doing it when they can. Yeah. Or they're just relying on word of mouth or distributors. Or some of them do have like a dedicated rep, but they're also doing like sales and delivery because they're self-distributing. Yeah. So no, it's very important that we have him. He maintains relationships. Yeah. He opens up new accounts all the time. Whereas, if we were just relying on the Sheehan sales rep, who are selling our brand plus 200 other brands, right? They're not going to, open a new they're not going to open a new account just to sell a Middle Ages handle. Right. Where if he does all the legwork, says, oh, this account isn't even working with Sheehan. He'll go in there, he'll bring him the Sheehan paperwork. He'll be like, this is who your sales rep's going to be. And does all the legwork to get him established Sheehan. Yeah. And then, all of a sudden we're selling product there. So
yeah, that's awesome.
No, he's essential. Yeah.
That's the one thing that so Limp Lizard last year tried to go for their beer program. They tried to go completely local. I think they had I think they've got maybe 15 or 20 different tap handles there. And I think they had maybe 4 of them were out of state or big ones. And Nick was just like, all right, this summer, I'm just going to go all in on the local breweries and see what it does. And he said it was a pain in the ass working with multiple, the 2 big distributors, but then also having to work with all the individual breweries who distribute. Yeah. And so, and then some of them are delivering on Fridays, right as dinner's starting. Some of them are delivering Mondays. Some are showing up on Friday and dropping off their tiny order and saying, hey, I have to have a check before I leave here. And then some of them the self-distributors not picking up their kegs. He was just talking about how big of a pain in the ass it was. And so in my head, I'm thinking okay, so I need to create some system through Eat Local New York where I can help restaurants get craft beer from local companies easier. Mm-hmm. And the more and more I thought about it, I realized that was a beer distributor.
Yeah, that is exactly what it is. And there are smaller beer distributors that have been successful opening up in other areas. Yeah. It would be tough for Syracuse.
Yeah. It would be tough, but I think imagine if there was one that just did Syracuse and the surrounding areas and just did Syracuse breweries.
That would be cool.
It'd be really cool. It would be challenging.
I don't know if it'd be viable as a business.
Yeah,
you
so
know, that's the
no, not as a people have to get a full-time salary. No,
right. Yeah, it's like, I mean, running a beer district. I mean, there's a reason they're charging you 30% margins plus, which ends up being almost 50% markup.
Yeah,
there's a reason they're making so much money on your beer, and there's a lot of logistics. Lot of cold storage, a lot of chasing people for money.
Yeah.
A lot of law compliance. One thing that's nice about us being with TJ Sheehan, who's like we consider an unbelievable partner to us. Like, and they do a great job by us. I mean, of course, we have our complaints.
Right.
Who doesn't have their complaints about their distributors? But we consider them a partner. One of the best things is I don't have to chase people for money.
Yeah.
I don't have to pick up my kegs.
Right.
Even if they're not gonna do every little bit of legwork that I want them to do for opening new accounts, because again, they're servicing hundreds of other brands too.
Right.
It's that headache that they completely remove. They pay me every week. They pick up every week. I get paid every week.
Wow.
For 30-day terms, but I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
I know that money will be in my account, and I can make payroll, and I can I know exactly what's going to be in my account.
Yeah.
I don't have to go knock on people's doors for checks.
Yeah.
It's
that's great.
No, that's one of the biggest things, honestly. I mean, when we self-distributed, we had accounts that when we finally moved to Sheehan never paid us. I mean, some of them are, still exist today, thousands of dollars that we, were just left hanging.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. It's I had a business years ago that closed up when I was 21. I had a furniture store. I opened with a friend. Dumbest thing I've ever done. Well, maybe third dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. But
a furniture store.
Yeah, a furniture store.
Where was it?
So we were in East Syracuse behind the Pier 1, the old Pier 1 Imports.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was kind of a longer story. I'll shorten up. But the church I went to, there was this trend in furniture. You've seen like the telephone pole signs that say like Queen mattress for like $199. Call this number.
Okay.
So that was it was a franchise you bought into. and that was the way they advertised was you would find a shitty warehouse. You would display like shitty mattresses and furniture. And you would have this whole backstory of a friend of mine is a furniture distributor, and he's got all this overstock from stores all across the country. He doesn't have a warehouse to store it. I have a warehouse. I'm storing it. I'm helping him move it out. Everything's marked down like 50 to 70% off. I mean, that was you could find these places all across the country.
I've heard of similar,
Right. Yeah. So when I was a high schooler, this church that we went to, there was like two guys in that church that owned businesses doing that. One in Albany, one in Syracuse. And so from like a high school job, I got, it was like cleaning warehouses and, for them and, then delivering mattresses and then selling them and shit like that. And so that led to when I was 21, I opened one up with a friend of mine, with actually my youth pastor at the time, in East Syracuse. Fucking royal mistake. I mean, talking about dumb business acumen. I mean, first of all, everyone I knew in my life was telling me don't do it, and I still did it. Second of all, everything had to be put in my name, which I didn't find fishy at all at the time. And third of all, I thought sales tax was free money. Like I didn't know you had to pay that to the state at the end of the year. That's how I was, I was a fucking kid. I was an idiot, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. My brain was still being formed. And so I had it for a year, and it just bombed colossally. It was just such a major, major, major mistake. And now as I'm telling you the story, I'm forgetting what my point was with telling you the story. So, but when it closed, and it's a terrible story of how it closed, the business owner wound up being like the biggest, shyster that ever existed. And
the guy who owned the franchise?
No, the guy that was my partner.
Oh, okay. All right.
He was like forging my name on stuff. And
shit.
It was like the year the iPhone first came out. And at the end of the year, I was like going through our bank accounts, like pay the taxes. And I saw that there was like a $1,000 fee to like AT&T, like pay, from our credit card for the business. And it was him canceling his service with the one account so he could go buy the iPhone at the other account. Or there was a day that he like made this big deal of, I want to take you to dinner. You do so much for the business. Well, the business paid for that dinner, so stuff like that.
Which is all in your name.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So at 21 years old, a story I won't get into, but at 21 years old, I found myself $80,000 in debt. Furniture store was completely taken away from me, and customers that like were expecting their mattresses the next day, like vendors that we didn't pay, that were expecting to get paid. And it took me a while. I mean, it took me a good 8 years to pay it all off, but I made sure every fucking vendor got paid back.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I was not about to have one person say, Anthony Tringale never paid me for this bill, and that does still floor me today, even in the food service. Like nothing that's happened to me, thank God, but the horror stories I hear of restaurants who go out of business and will go to their vendors and just be like, "What do you want me to do? I went out of business."
I mean, and there's people who do it repeatedly too.
That's wild.
I wonder how they get away with it. That's like I mean, obviously, as you know.
Right.
Word spreads quickly through the industry.
Yeah.
And to hear that somebody's opened again.
Yeah.
And did the same thing again. It's like, how are you offering this person credit terms?
Yeah.
It's
a challenge that I face with like running Eat Local. Syracuse is a really negative market. And I've never seen a market of consumers that want and focus so much on negativity about a restaurant. Yeah. Like they want to hear and talk about every bad thing that happens. I've never seen a market like that before. And even happening today. And, but I try not to post negative shit from Eat Local. If we have a bad experience at a restaurant, I don't want to talk about it. I try not to. There's sometimes I will. There's sometimes, I'll just be like, hey, this and that, I wouldn't go there. There's better pizza shops in town, stuff like that.
Right. I tend to be optimistic about places too.
Yeah.
It's
right.
What does it do? What good does it do for you to talk bad about people?
Right.
Again, person to person.
Yes.
I'll be like, hey, this happened.
Yeah.
But I'm not about to want to be on Facebook.
Go on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah. Into the Brewers Guild. Hey, just Yeah. That's wild. Well, all right. So we've been here for a while, but my last question is: what's on the horizon for Middle Ages? What's on your radar of things?
Well, again, the big event space. That's our biggest thing we have going forward. It is such a cool. You're gonna have to come see it. It is such a cool space. It has this industrial vibe, but it's completely like wood ceilings. Like it almost looks like a barn. It's a trellis building.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's part of so we don't own the building.
Okay.
So it's part of a larger project where the whole building is getting revitalized.
Wow.
So the outdoor space is going to be completely redone. We're going to have a patio, a real patio, not just like some, little space out front that we throw some picnic tables. That's what most of my time and stuff is going into right now, which is the planning for it.
Yeah. That's cool.
Other than that, I mean, always new beer.
Yeah.
Always the old favorites. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, you said it all.
Yeah.
We've been here for an hour and 45 minutes.
Oh, wow. It's been that long.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah.
It was like a nice conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Everybody go check out Middle Ages. Anywhere beer is sold in Syracuse, you can find them most likely. So check them out. Yeah. All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Anthony.